The interview today is with Allan Mattke. The date is the 16th of March 2011. Allan served in the Army from January of 1954 until December of 1955. He was a sergeant with the engineering and infantry and served in Korea for the reconstruction. So Allan, thanks for coming in today. We appreciate that. We're going to have you start by stating and spelling your full name.
Okay, Allan, A-L-L-A-N, Mattke, M-A-T-T-K-E.
Okay, and can you tell me where and when you were born?
I was born in Fredericksburg, Iowa, just a few miles over the road here, February 17th, 1934.
Okay. And what did your family do?
We were farmers. I was raised on the farm. From there, went on to college. So.
Okay. Okay. You grew up on the farm outside of Fredericksburg?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me about your childhood. What do you remember about? You grew up during some rough times.
Well, yes, I remember World War II beginning. We were just getting electricity at the time on the farm. We moved right at the beginning of World War II in March, right after it started in December. And my dad was a farmer, so he was excused from the draft at that point in time. I was born and raised on the farm. We milked cows, had hogs, chickens, just a typical farm for those days. Did a lot of 4-H work growing up. From there, attended Iowa State University at Ames.
Do you have any brothers or sisters?
Yes, I do. I have a brother 3 years older than I am. He was a Marine. My sister is 10 years younger than I am, and that's our family.
What do you know about your brother's service? Where did he serve?
He was in during the conflict, but he spent all of his time in California. He got reassigned after his basic training out there into a unit right in California, so he spent his time stateside. I always tease him because here he spent his time during the conflict in California, and I spent my time over there
in Korea,
after the conflict.
After the conflict, yeah. So you grew up on a farm. Where did you go to school?
High school was Fredericksburg.
Okay.
That was just Fredericksburg back then. Now it's Sumner, Fredericksburg. So I've moved back to Sumner since roundabout way of getting here. But yes, I was born and raised in Fredericksburg. Went to high school at Fredericksburg, and from there to college at Ames.
At Ames, okay. Did you go to country school, elementary country school?
Yes.
Or did you? Okay.
Yes, I went 9 years to country school. That sounds bad, but, back then we had to take a full year of kindergarten. So that constitutes my 9 years.
Yeah. So do you have a favorite teacher or favorite subject when you were in country school? Or?
Oh, recess probably the most. No, we lived, I always like to tell my kids and grandkids how I went to country school. We lived in the center of a mile on one side of a section. The school building was on just a mile across the field. The farm that we lived on ran from completely through the center of the section. In the wintertime, I'd ride my horse to school, tie the reins around the same way every day. So he'd go back home, and then Dad knew I got to school okay. So something different from the way kids go to school today.
So how did you get home then? Because your horse had already gone home.
Well, I had to walk. Unless I could find a ride with somebody, but usually it was on just walking.
So in the spring when the fields were muddy or when there was crops planted in there, you couldn't walk across country, so you had to go around? Or?
Well, you couldn't. No, we could walk across. It was okay. few fences to climb or gates to open, but no, we could go all the way.
So when you go to Fredericksburg to high school, was that a big transition for you, or was that something that you liked?
Yeah, well, it was, I didn't seem to mind it. Yes, it was a transition because I had gone 9 years through country school, not a person in my class. An odd situation. We had a family move into our neighborhood while we were in country school. Brought in 5 kids into our country school in one family, not one of them in my grade. So I went 9 years to country school, the only one in my grade. So it was a little transition to high school to have others in my class. We adjusted okay.
When you got into high school, did you go out for any sports or extracurricular?
Well, at that time we only had baseball and basketball, but yes, I was involved in both sports, music activities, about everything there was to be in.
So, and did you then have an after-school or summer job when you were in high school?
Well, yes, that was home on the farm.
That was working on the farm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Milking cows and cleaning barns and etc.
There's always something to do.
Oh my, yes. And 4-H projects kept me busy. That was a big sideline other than school activities. So I was busy all the time.
Did you show cattle or stock or anything?
Yes, I showed Holstein cattle. One highlight was winning a judging contest at Dairy Cattle Congress.
Wow. That's neat. So, and when did you graduate?
1952, I graduated from high school.
And then you went to Ames?
Yes, I attended a year at Ames, and I started my second year at Ames, and I was unhappy with what I was doing and how things were going, and undecided what I wanted to do. And I decided that I knew I was going to get 2 years in service, so I volunteered for the draft at that point in time, and told them to put my name on for January 1st. I could go after Christmas break at school. So I was drafted in January of 1954 and spent 16 weeks down at Leonard Wood, Missouri, going through basic training. From there, I went on to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, to attend an engineer foreman school. From there to Korea. We all thought when we graduated from Belvoir that we were going to get a European assignment. We all wanted to go to Europe, of course, but we were, I guess, fortunate and unfortunate at the same time. We got the Far East assignments. So I spent the next 14 months in Korea.
So you were trained as an engineer.
Yes.
Which means you're doing
okay.
Construction, reconstruction, what
Engineer foreman school, we went through operating heavy equipment such as road graders, bulldozers, etc., being able to operate them anywhere, anytime, building temporary bridges, permanent bridges, constructing roadways, airstrips, whatever was needed for transportation. Some building construction as far as buildings are concerned.
Do they, when you're learning this, when you're being taught this, are they actually taking you out in the field and having you construct bridges and buildings?
Yes. Yes, it's an on-the-job training. Yeah, we actually got to run heavy equipment. We actually built pontoon bridges, some permanent bridges, which, of course, they're built in sections so you can tear them down, reconstruct them again. But it was actual situations, yes.
So how long was that engineer foreman school?
That was 14 weeks.
14 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So that's quite a long schooling.
Yes, it was. It was very, very interesting. And I gained a lot from that. Being a farm boy, that was interesting for me. And so I've used a lot of it in years afterwards.
You thought you were going to Europe, though, and you get the...
I've never been to Europe, and just before I came home from Korea, they guaranteed us a European assignment if we would re-enlist for 3 more years. At that point in time, I said no. Since that, I have sometimes wished I would have taken the 3 more and went to Europe, but no, I didn't.
Yeah. So you get orders for Korea. Was that disappointing to you, or was that okay? Or?
Well, it was a blow, yes. We didn't even get a furlough to come. Belvoir, Virginia, we shipped out of Seattle, Washington. We didn't even get a furlough to come home in between times. The only furlough I had was after the first 8 weeks of basic. And that was the only time I'd been home until I got home after I'd been in Korea. So
tell me about the trip over. How do you get over to Korea? What was that like?
Well, one more interesting point, from Belvoir to Fort Belvoir, Virginia to Seattle, Washington, where we shipped out. I was an Iowa farm boy, had never been out of the state of Iowa. Oh, I guess maybe we'd been to Minnesota once to visit some relatives when I was just a little kid. But anyway, they flew us at night from one coast to the other coast, so I didn't get to see any of the U.S. Shipped out of Seattle, Washington, then over to Korea. 14 days board the ship going over. We landed at Busan, which is right down on the southern tip of Korea. Boarded a one-way train. They didn't have, what do you call them, roundabouts, roundhouse. Mm-hmm. They'd run it one way going up and reverse going back. They couldn't turn them around. Their cars and passenger cars were something else. Just slat seats like your swing seats you have on your front porch. That was the seats in the passenger cars. We went up to Incheon, which is up sort of center Korea. That was where I was stationed. And that was in the engineer unit at Incheon.
And what did you do up there? What were your responsibilities?
Okay, that was interesting. Again, I got assigned to a headquarters company because I'd had some college. I think that was the only reason. But my responsibilities were, I got assigned with another sergeant first class, and we would go out and inspect the job sites. We were building roads, airstrips, buildings, trying to get the country back on its feet again, helping them get started again.
How bad was the country when you got there? What did you see?
Oh, well, you've seen pictures of war, destruction, bombed out buildings, burned out buildings, roads tore up. That's what we were working with. When they had the Olympics in Korea on TV, I couldn't believe the difference in the city of Seoul. It was built up beautiful. But when I was over there, it was bombed out, shells of buildings burned out, just devastation plus.
So what did you do? What were some of the job assignments that you had?
Okay, this sergeant and myself were responsible for making inspections on all of these areas, roads, airstrips, buildings, etc. And we were also responsible for a gas line which ran from Busan clear up through Korea to disperse gas to different units along the way. That was interesting because we kept losing gas. Couldn't come up with the figures to keep our gallonage correct. And down in the city of Incheon, there was a viaduct that went under this one-way railroad. And finally, we found out how we were losing gas. The Koreans had tunneled went down in this underpass. they had tunneled back underneath the railroad, tapped into our gas line, had a hose down here in the bottom, and with the old trucks that they had pieced together from all the bombed out vehicles and etc., and they were pretty crafty and crude. They pieced together vehicles. They'd drive them down through this viaduct, fill them up, and away they'd go. So that was where some of our gas went. They were pretty shrewd people, very crafty.
That takes a little engineering skill in itself too.
Yes, it does. Speaking of losing gas, we also had a situation in our motor pool in our headquarters company. We were also losing gas down out of there. Couldn't figure out how it was happening. This old Papazan would come in with his ox and his cart every day, and he would empty our latrines, which were 55-gallon barrels cut in half. Well, come to find out, he was going down past the motor pool. He'd grab with some of these 5-gallon gas cans, which were flat, so large, and he'd drop them in these buckets from the latrines, walk right out through the gate with them. As I say, they were crafty, shrewd people. So speaking of the crafty, shrewd people, we'd go down, if we got time off, we could go down to Incheon and see what was happening in the life of the city. You had to, if you had a wristwatch, you had to keep it concealed or else take it off. These little kids would come along and get to talking to you. They'd grab it and tear the band off your wristwatch and steal it right off your arm.
No pickpocketing thing. They just blatantly rip it off.
Yes, they could pickpocket. Oh, they were experts.
Huh. So tell me about your job. Your job was inspecting.
Yes.
Inspecting sites. Is this inspecting prior to reconstruction, or was this after?
It was both.
Okay.
We'd have to decide on the sites, get the sites ready, or get one of our units ready to get the site ready for building or roads or whatever. It was from beginning to end on whatever we went into.
And then inspecting once the construction was started to make sure that it was...
Make sure they had materials and that it was meeting specifications blueprint-wise. Just construction period from beginning to end, yes.
When you're in that situation, when the United States is coming over for reconstruction, who decides what goes where? Is that the United States that does that, or is that the Korean government, or is that the people? How does that?
I really can't answer that question. I don't really know. We were just following orders. They'd come down from headquarters, but where they came from, where headquarters got them, I'm not sure. I can't answer that. I don't know. Probably it was, I would guess it was probably a joint effort from their governments to in cities and so on, what they need the most and where they need it.
That would make sense, yeah. So what was a typical day like for you over there when you're in the engineering unit, from the time that you arise in the morning until you turn in at night?
Okay, we'd have to, of course, check in revelry in the morning. Everybody meet that. If we went out on the job sites, it would be the sergeant and myself in a Jeep. We'd go out, travel from one place to wherever we had projects going, return and write up reports and make sure everything was in order, supplies in progress. They were interested in all phases of it.
And did you do this, was this like a 5-day-a-week job, or?
Yes, basically it was 5 days. We'd work in shifts. Some of us would have to work weekends. I mean, it was like a normal job here in the States. Guard duty was also involved in that. Everybody pulled guard duty.
Were you staying in barracks, or were you in tents, or what?
Tents.
Tents.
Yes. I think it was 6 or 8, I can't remember for sure. I think it was 8 of us in a tent.
And you were with the engineering group how long?
About half of my tour, about half of my 14 months tour, I was in the engineers. At that point in time, the unit I was in was 439th Engineer Unit. Had been a guard unit during the conflict, but they were they took the colors back to the States just on paper, and all the rest of us got reassigned to other units. And I was, again, I guess, fortunate or unfortunate, I got infantry. And when I got up to the infantry, they evidently were pretty hard up for personnel because, again, I got into a headquarters company and got an assignment which was supposed to be for a second lieutenant. And I was merely a little corporal, and they put me into second lieutenant, got into intelligence, and we had to run patrols and keep the company areas secure and so on. So that was an experience again.
Well, tell us about that. What is that like when you say you had to run patrols? What?
Okay, sometimes we'd run day patrols up in the hills outside of our compounds. Well, all of our compounds were fenced-in areas, high wire security, guard gates, and so on. And sometimes we'd run day patrols, sometimes we'd run night patrols, make sure there was no one out there trying to set up bomb squads or confiscate materials, etc. Like I say, some of it was day patrols, some of it was night patrols. We had to vary so they wouldn't know exactly where we were or what we were doing. So.
And the someone would be the North Koreans, so they weren't
yes.
coming down. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because at that point in time, we weren't too far from the DMZ. We were, somewhere between Seoul and the DMZ. It was north of Seoul and south of the DMZ.
Did you, when you were running these patrols, did you find anything? Did you see?
Oh, every once in a while we'd find suspects, take them into headquarters, and they'd be interrogated, and some released and some imprisoned. It just depended on what they found.
Can you tell us about someone you found, or what happened, or? Oh,
I don't recall any. I don't know what really happened to them after they'd been interrogated by the ones that we'd bring in. Some were kids, some were young girls, some were men. You just didn't know who you were going to run into.
So when you're out on these patrols, and I've seen pictures of Korea, you know, it looks pretty hilly and pretty rugged.
Yes, it is. It's a very rugged country. Their rice paddies would always be down in the valleys, but the hillsides were very rugged, and roads were hard to come by. So it was rough country. Yes.
It had to be difficult to patrol.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do that in jeeps or on foot, or?
Oh, our patrols were all on foot. No, we didn't run any patrols in jeeps or vehicles. That was all on foot.
How far would you go on a typical
Oh my. Anywhere from maybe just around our compound to maybe a few miles out in the way, just depending on what our assignments and what maybe some suspects had been spotted, or we never knew from day to day. It just depended on what had come down for orders.
This had to be a bit of a change for you from going from the engineering group to this unit.
Yes, it was. Quite a change. Like I said, it called for a second lieutenant, but I don't know why, but I was soon made to sergeant after I got this job for second lieutenant. So I was fortunate in that respect.
So what are the responsibilities of your job then? What all did you have to do in that position?
Most of it required top secret information. And back that point in time, top secret meant top secret. And today, I marvel at what the press and media come out with on telling you what's what and who's where and how much they have and so on and so forth. But as far as top secret information, another interesting thing, when I got this job as up in intelligence, I had to be cleared. I hadn't been cleared previously for that high a material. And of course, they inspect your background clear back to day one. Well, my dad had sold the farm and was working in a lumber yard back in Fredericksburg. And here come these two officers one day and started questioning, wondered about Allan Mattke. It took him by surprise. He didn't know what had happened. He thought something was wrong, but in the end it turned out to be okay, but it really shocked him.
Oh, he had to think they were bringing bad news or something.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, how awful. What a relief for him to find out. Did they tell him what?
Oh, yes, they finally told him what they were there for, but he was quite surprised, taken off his feet. Yes.
So when you're over there and you're in this position, were there close calls? Were there situations that really alarmed you, or?
We were out on bivouac one night. Of course, we had to run patrol or run bivouac situations like regular combat just to stay in practice and so everybody would know what their assignments were. Well, we were out and we were sound asleep in pup tents one night on this bivouac excursion. All of a sudden, firecrackers, ammunition started going off right outside our pup tents, right in our company area. I just knew the communists had got over the DMZ, and there they were. But it was one of our line companies. Someone had let the aggressors get through and got into our headquarters company. They were firing gunshots, everything around, as if it would have been a communist attack. But that was probably the most exciting of any of the situations I'd been in. So.
You thought you'd had it there.
Yes, we did.
Oh my. So how you were in Korea 14 months altogether? How did it happen that you came home or came back to the United States? Was it because your time was up?
Yes.
Okay.
I was in for 2 years. I had volunteered for the 2-year draft, and that was an interesting thing coming home. On the way home, we had got on the ship. We had docked at Yokohama for changing supplies and so on, and started out across the ocean. I don't know, a day or 2 or 3 out after we were on our way home, we met a tanker ship, and they radioed and said that they'd had a mishap aboard their tanker, and some fella had gotten in a fight and gotten hit over the head with some heavy equipment, and it had killed him. And they wondered if we would take him aboard and bring him back to the States, because they were headed for Japan. So they said yes, we'd take him. So they put him down in our freezer, radioed ahead to San Francisco and said, yes, you can dock as soon as you can get home. So we got into San Francisco 2 or 3 days early on account of that. So that was kind of a different situation. But yes, we got into San Francisco, then we were run through all the deep processing and so on. And as we got in there, coming from Korea, we had to go through this area, had to leave all of our clothes, everything we had with us or on us, then go through the line and get a clean suit of clothes, and that's what we came home with. Like some people, some of the guys got to bring all their things home. All we brought home was what we had on our back.
You didn't have a sea bag or anything like that with any?
We weren't discharged with anything because we came from Korea. For disease control and everything, they kept everything we had that we had brought from Korea. That stayed there, and they gave us clean clothes to wear home, to get home, and that was it.
That was it. Huh. Yeah, because a lot of the guys in World War II would bring souvenirs and things, pictures and things like that home.
I don't know why we didn't get anything to bring home.
So were you discharged right away when you got home, or did?
In San Francisco, yes, we were discharged in Frisco. That was another interesting trip. There was 3 or 4 of us coming to Iowa from Frisco, and the only thing we could get was a night flight from Frisco to Des Moines. That was the only direct flight. So we took that, and it was at night, and while we were flying, most everybody was asleep, but us guys, we were wide awake. So they fed us sandwiches, and we had everybody else's lunch. But we got into Des Moines, and then my brother was in school at Ames, so can't remember how I got up to Des Moines or up to Ames. But anyway, I think he took me home, or I borrowed his car. But when I got home, I hadn't told the folks they knew I was coming home, but they didn't know when. And I walked in the farmhouse door. My mother was under the kitchen table waxing the floor. She about raised the table when I walked in. So that was my tour.
What an interesting time. So when you're discharged, after you have had this top secret clearance, do they do a debriefing? What do they tell you? Do they say you can't talk about this ever, or what?
Well, that goes in with the top secret. I mean, regardless whether you're in or out.
So when you get back home, what do you do then? Kind of fill us in on what has happened since you got out of the service.
Oh, okay. Well, one more thing while I was in service. This was back in the early 50s, and I don't know if it was against the law, but it was not encouraged for hitchhiking. But I had an experience. I was down in Leonard Wood. I was hitchhiking home one weekend, and I got stranded out north of Marshalltown. Intersection, I can't remember the 2 highways. But anyway, a couple of high school kids stopped and asked me about what I was doing or where I was stationed and so on. Wondered where I was going, and I told them it was Fredericksburg. Well, that was probably close to 100 miles from where I was stranded. Those kids took me clear home. They wouldn't take a dime for it. They said, my brother's in service. We're just trying to help. Like I said, I don't know if it was illegal, but it was discouraged to hitchhike. But anyway, I had very good luck hitchhiking.
What a good experience. Yeah. And so there are good kids out there.
Yes, there are good kids out there. Oh, you mentioned what I have done since. Well, I went back to Iowa State and finished my degree, and because of my 2 years in service, I was eligible for GI Bill. And that's one thing I'm very thankful and gracious to the U.S. government for that type of program. Had it not been for that, I may not have finished college. But that's really a benefit for service people.
What did you study at Ames?
I went through industrial education, which trained you to be a high school and junior high shop teacher, or you can go on to the industrial side. I took the teaching side thinking I'd be a teacher, but 2 years of that, and I said, no more, I can't take this. So my father-in-law at that point in time was in the hardware store trying to retire, and I was dissatisfied in teaching, so I bought his hardware store. And I had that for 10 years, and a fella come in one day and wondered if my store was for sale. I said, well, I'll sell anything I got but my wife and kids. He bought it my way, my terms, so then I had to do something else. So I carpentered 3 years on my own, and Iowa Central Community College from Fort Dodge called me up, wondered if I'd start a carpentry program. So I went up and visited with them and spent 18 more years building houses with students at Iowa Central. And then I had a triple bypass open heart surgery, and they had offered me early retirement, and putting all together I took early retirement from Iowa Central. But then I had 5 more years of working years left after my heart surgery, and I was feeling good, so I worked for Payless Cashway for 5 years after that. Then
was that still in Fort Dodge?
That was in Fort Dodge, yes. That's kind of rounds out my...
So how did you end up here in Sumner then?
Well, that's another long story. I'll make it short as I can. My wife now, well, I lost my wife from my first wife, and I found out through a mutual friend that there was a lady here in Sumner that I had grown up with in 4-H work. But back in high school days, she was going to Nashua and I was going to Fredericksburg. Well, back then that was a long ways in between times, and you didn't date girls far away, so we never dated. But anyway, we had been in a lot of 4-H activities together and so on, and I found out she was alone also, so I called her up and we were remarried. It'll be 5 years this coming November. So here I am in Sumner.
That's great. So do you have children?
Okay, yes. I have 3 boys, and each boy has 2 boys, making 3 sons, 6 grandsons, and I've got 1 granddaughter who will be 2 years old in July. And Wilma Hartman is my wife now, and she also has 3 children and 6 grandchildren. And by the middle of the summer, we will have, I think it's 5 great-grandchildren.
Your house is a busy place at the holidays, I bet.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, yeah. So now, are your sons, do they all live around here? Or what?
I have a son in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I have a son in Temple, Texas, and a son in Fort Dodge. And they are all doing real well.
Allan, when you look back at the time that you spent in the military, how do you think that changed you, or what impact do you think it had on you?
Well, I know I grew up a lot. I think it's a good experience for everybody. You learn a lot about yourself, how to take care of yourself. Mom's not there to do it. So, yes, I would recommend it for anyone. I really think it's an advantage. Well, and in my case, had it not been for that, I wouldn't be able to wear this.
There you go. That is a major benefit out of serving.
Oh my, yes.
You know?
Yes, it is. I know the GI Bill has changed since I got it, but it's still available for those who are interested.
Yeah.
And I would highly recommend it for anyone.
Take advantage of it. My
yes.
gosh. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Allan, this is great. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Oh, I think that pretty well covers everything.
Okay. You're very well organized. You have it all on notes, so I really appreciate this, Allan. This has been the interview with Allan Mattke. The date is the 16th of March, 2011. Thank you so much.
Thank you.